"Mark, why did you bring a woman into our bedroom on our wedding night?" Daniela's voice cut through the quiet room like thunder tearing the sky apart. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands wrapped tightly around her walking stick. Her cloudy eyes, pale and empty, were turned toward the door she could not see. But somehow, she saw more than anyone in that room ever could. Mark stopped at the door, his hand still resting on the handle. Behind him stood Amanda, tall, confident, and wearing an Ankara gown that smelled of new perfume and arrogance. The scent spread through the room, heavy and expensive. But Daniela knew it instantly. She could translate smells like words. It was her gift, the strange, powerful gift that came after she lost her sight. Her voice trembled, but her aim was steady. "Mark," she said again, her walking stick pointing straight at him. "Why would you dishonor me this way? Why would you bring another woman into our bedroom, into our bed? On the very night we swore before God to be one." Amanda gasped quietly and moved back, whispering, "How? How did she know?" Daniela tilted her head slightly, and a sad smile crossed her face. "You wore jasmine perfume," she said softly. "The same one you had on at the wedding. I smelled it when you hugged Mark after the ceremony and said, 'Congratulations. I may be blind, but don't think I cannot see.'" Mark's jaw tightened. "Daniela, that's enough. Stop talking nonsense." "Nonsense?" she repeated, her tone rising with pain. "You call this nonsense?" Her hands trembled, but her words came out sharp and clear. "Mark, I gave you everything. I was the one who borrowed money for your transport when you were jobless. I ran through the rain that day so you wouldn't miss your interview, the one that gave you everything you own now. And do you remember what happened to me on that day? The car that hit me while I was running to help you. That was the day I lost my sight. I went blind. For you." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She stood now, slow but steady, the silk of her expensive pajamas brushing against her knees. Amanda looked away, guilt flashing briefly across her face, but Mark just hissed, "Daniela, you're overreacting. This isn't the time for drama." Daniela laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that comes from happiness. It was the kind that comes from heartbreak, when pain has nowhere left to go. "Drama?" she whispered. "Mark, this isn't drama. This is betrayal." She turned her face toward where his voice came from. "You think I don't know why you married me? You didn't marry me because you love me. You married me so people wouldn't say you abandoned the woman who went blind for you. You wanted to look like a good man, the loyal husband, the one who stayed. But in truth, you were already gone." Mark rolled his eyes. "Daniela, please, you're embarrassing yourself." "Embarrassing myself?" she said bitterly. "No, Mark, you're the one embarrassing your soul." Amanda tried to hold Mark's hand, but Daniela lifted her walking stick again and pointed toward her. "And you," Daniela said, her tone cold but calm. "You are a woman. You know what it means to dream, to hope, to trust. Imagine being me, blind, hurt, but still believing in love, and then having another woman walk into your wedding bed. Can you smell what betrayal feels like? Because I can." Amanda froze. For the first time, her face softened with shame. Daniela wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders. "You can have him," she said quietly. "You can both have your night. I will not beg for love or respect. But remember this, if I was sincere, if I truly gave all I had to help him become who he is today, and this is how I'm repaid, then God himself will repay you both in his own time." Mark scoffed and muttered under his breath, "She's just bitter." Daniela didn't respond. She simply nodded, as if those words confirmed everything she already knew. "I understand now," she said softly. "You never loved me. You loved what I could give you. My support, my sacrifices, my name. But you never loved me." Then she turned toward the door, her blind eyes steady, her chin lifted like a queen walking away from her throne. "I won't stay here to be humiliated," she said firmly. "Not tonight. Not ever again." She walked out, the tip of her walking stick tapping against the marble floor. Each sound echoed like a heartbeat in the silent house. Behind her, Amanda's nervous laugh filled the room. "She's dramatic." Mark shrugged, pretending not to care. "Ignore her. She'll come back." But Daniela didn't come back. In the hallway, she stopped by the wall, breathing hard, her chest tight with pain. The smell of roses from the wedding decorations filled her nose. Her heart ached, but her spirit was still alive. She reached for her phone and dialed, "Nadia." Her voice broke. "Please come get me. I can't stay here anymore." On the other end, Nadia's voice was sharp. "Daniela, what happened?" "He brought another woman into our room," Daniela whispered, trying not to sob. "On our wedding night." There was silence for a moment. Then Nadia said firmly, "Stay where you are. I'm on my way." When the call ended, Daniela lowered her phone and took a long, shaky breath. The pain inside her was heavy, but under it, something else was rising, something stronger. She turned toward the closed bedroom door and whispered to herself, "You think I'm weak because I can't see. But by tomorrow morning, the world will see you." The sound of a car horn echoed outside. Nadia had arrived. Daniela adjusted her walking stick, wiped her tears, and began her slow walk down the stairs, blind but unbroken. And as she stepped out of that mansion into the cold night, she didn't know that her quiet pain was about to shake an empire. That by dawn, the name Mark Tech would never sound the same again. The next morning, Lagos woke up to rain. Soft at first, then harder, the kind that hits rooftops like drumming fingers from heaven. In a small apartment across town, Daniela sat quietly on the couch, wrapped in a grey blanket. Her best friend, Nadia, stood by the kitchen counter, boiling water for tea. The events of the previous night were still playing in both their minds, like a film on repeat. "Daniela?" Nadia said softly, walking over. "You haven't closed your eyes since last night." Daniela turned her face slightly toward the sound. Her cloudy eyes were swollen from tears, but her posture was still composed. "How can I?" she said quietly. "He broke me, Nadia. On our wedding night. The same man I lost my sight for." Nadia set the cup down beside her. "I told you to rest." "But no," Daniela interrupted, her tone suddenly firm. "No, Nadia. I will not rest. Last night taught me something. Silence is a kind of death. If I keep quiet, he wins again." Nadia tilted her head. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the world will hear my story," Daniela replied. Her voice was steady now, no longer the voice of a broken wife, but of a woman with purpose. "They will know who Mark really is. They will know what he did to me. Not because I want revenge, but because people like him think they can destroy others and sleep peacefully." Nadia's eyes widened. "You want to go public?" "Daniela, think carefully. That man is powerful. He owns half the tech market in Nigeria." Daniela smiled faintly. "Yes, but remember, I helped build that empire. My sacrifices gave him the wings to fly. And if I could give him wings, I can take them away." Nadia paused, realizing that her friend wasn't acting out of pain anymore. She was acting with strategy. "How will you do it?" she asked. Daniela reached for her phone on the table. "I already have proof. The recording from last night." Nadia blinked. "You recorded him?" Daniela nodded slowly. "Yes. The moment I heard his footsteps, I turned on the voice recorder. Every word, every insult, every laugh from that woman. It's all there." Nadia gasped softly. "Daniela, this could destroy him." "That's not my goal," Daniela said calmly. "My goal is truth." 2 hours later, the rain stopped. Outside, cars splashed through puddles as morning life began again in the busy streets of Lagos. But inside the small apartment, a storm of another kind was brewing. Daniela sat upright on a chair, dressed neatly in a white blouse and black skirt. Her hair was brushed back into a bun. Nadia stood beside her, holding her phone nervously as reporters began to arrive one after another. Within 30 minutes, the tiny living room was filled with cameras, microphones, and flashing lights. The sound of camera shutters echoed like heartbeats. One of the journalists whispered to another, "Is that her? The blind woman who married Mark Tech's CEO?" Daniela's lips trembled slightly, but she straightened her shoulders. Nadia touched her arm gently and whispered, "You're ready." Daniela nodded. A senior journalist from Channel 8 News stepped forward. "Mrs. Daniela Mark," he said respectfully, "why have you called this press conference?" Daniela took a slow breath. Then, with quiet courage, she spoke. "Last night was supposed to be my wedding night," she began. "But instead of spending it with my husband, I spent it watching him walk into our bedroom with another woman." The room went silent. Even the reporters lowered their cameras slightly, stunned by the calm in her voice. "I may be blind," Daniela continued, "but I am not foolish. I was born with a gift. I can translate smells. I can tell who a person is by the scent that surrounds them. So when my husband came into our room with another woman, I didn't need eyes to see. I knew exactly what was happening. A murmur spread across the room. Daniela pressed on. But what hurt me most was not the betrayal. It was the reason behind it. I lost my sight because of him. I was hit by a car while running to borrow money for his transport to an interview. That interview changed his life. It made him the man you all know today, the billionaire CEO of MarkTech. She paused, her fingers tightening on her walking stick. And last night, that same man told me I was an embarrassment, that I should be silent. But I will not be silent. If he could do this to me, imagine what he could do to others, to his partners, his staff, his investors, when they become inconvenient to him. Then, with Nadia's help, she pressed play on her phone. The recording played aloud. Mark's angry voice, Amanda's laugh, Daniela's trembling but brave words, and the painful silence that followed. Every sound filled the air like thunder. When it ended, Daniela spoke again. I'm not doing this for pity. I'm doing this for justice. I am leaving that marriage for my peace and my safety, because a man who can humiliate his wife on their wedding night may one day decide to destroy her completely. The journalists were quiet, some teary-eyed, some furious. Then came a flood of flashes, questions, and applause. Within hours, the story hit every major media outlet. Blind wife exposes billionaire CEO's wedding night betrayal. It trended across Nigeria. By noon, MarkTech's headquarters was surrounded by reporters. Investors started calling. Contracts were frozen. Partnerships were withdrawn. Mark's phone didn't stop ringing, but it wasn't congratulations anymore. It was chaos. Inside his glass office, Mark slammed his hand on the table. Who told her to do this? He shouted, pacing like a trapped lion. Amanda stood by the window, pale and quiet. Maybe you should apologize. Apologize, he barked. To a blind woman who just ruined my career. He didn't realize it yet, but his empire had already started to fall. And while he screamed inside his marble office, Daniela sat calmly in Nadia's small living room, sipping her tea. Her voice was soft when she said, "The same God who watched me cry will watch him fall." Outside, thunder rumbled again, low, distant, like the warning of a storm that had only just begun. By noon, the story had exploded beyond control. Every radio, TV, and social media platform was carrying the same headline. Blind wife exposes billionaire CEO's wedding night betrayal. In cafes and offices, people whispered about it. In taxis, drivers shook their heads. Even in boardrooms, executives turned down the volume of their meetings just to listen. And in the middle of it all, Mark sat in his glass office at MarkTech Towers, his face pale, his hands shaking as he watched himself being dragged on every channel in the country. On the television mounted on his office wall, Daniela's calm, tearful face filled the screen. She was speaking with quiet grace, her walking stick resting beside her chair. Every sentence she spoke pierced his heart like a blade. If a man can humiliate the woman who went blind for him, imagine what he can do to those who trust him in business. Is the known. Mark grabbed the remote and switched off the TV angrily, breathing heavily. "Turn it off," he yelled, though he was alone. Amanda, his mistress, entered the office carefully. She looked frightened, no longer the confident woman from the night before. "Mark, it's everywhere. The company's name people are pulling out." "Let them," Mark barked, but his voice cracked halfway through. "Let them pull out, it'll blow over." Amanda hesitated. "They're saying the government wants to investigate your company. Something about ethics and contract manipulation." Mark's face darkened. He sat down slowly, his chest rising and falling fast. "What did I do to deserve this?" he muttered, his eyes filled with disbelief. Amanda stayed quiet. He suddenly slammed his fist against the desk. "That woman, she's ruining me." Amanda flinched. "Mark, please don't shout at me." But he didn't hear her. His world was collapsing too loudly for him to notice anything else. By evening, MarkTech's stock had dropped 27%. Investors pulled out of major projects. Emails flooded in, all cold, formal and final. "Due to recent public controversies, our company will no longer proceed with the pending contract. Please consider this letter as formal termination of our partnership." Each new notification was a punch to his chest. By the time he left the office, his phone had over 50 missed calls from journalists, banks, and even his own board members. Amanda followed behind him silently, but as soon as they reached the parking lot, she stopped walking. Mark turned around, his expression tired and hollow. "What are you doing?" Amanda looked down, fidgeting with her bag strap. I think I should give you space. This isn't what I signed up for." Mark blinked in disbelief. "You're leaving?" She looked up at him, guilt mixing with fear. "I didn't come into this for drama, Mark. You said you were happy, that your wife understood." "Understood what?" he snapped. "That you'd take her place on our wedding bed." Amanda's eyes welled with tears. "I'm sorry, but I can't be part of this. It's everywhere now. My family's calling me. My father knows. Please understand." And before he could reply, she walked away. Her red dress disappeared into the rain. Mark stood there, completely still. The sound of the downpour drowned everything. For the first time, he realized he was alone. Truly alone. Across town, Daniela sat on Nadia's couch, listening quietly as the news anchor's voice played through the TV. Following yesterday's press conference, investors have withdrawn support from Mark Tech. Financial regulators have reportedly frozen company accounts pending investigation into alleged misconduct. Daniela's hands were folded on her lap. She didn't smile, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. Nadia sat beside her, holding her hand. "It's happening, Daniela. Everything you said, it's all coming to light." Daniela sighed. "I didn't plan this to destroy him, Nadia. I only wanted the truth to live." "And it has," Nadia said softly. There was a long pause. Then Nadia added, "You still love him, don't you?" Daniela didn't answer immediately. She turned her face toward the sound of the rain outside and whispered, "Love and pain live in the same house, Nadia. But one day you must decide which one you'll let stay." Nadia squeezed her hand gently. "And you? Which one will you keep?" Daniela smiled faintly. Peace. Days passed. Mark stopped picking up calls. His mansion became quiet. No servants, no laughter, just echoes of what used to be pride. He would stand by the window at night, watching the rain slide down the glass, replaying Daniela's words in his head. "I lost my sight for you. I will not beg for love. God will judge between us." He tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, the face that once loved him enough to walk through fire. One evening, as he sat in the dark living room, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at it. A message from First Continental Bank. Final notice. Due to default on your business loans, your estate at Ikoyi and company assets will be auctioned within 14 days. Mark dropped the phone. His chest tightened. His empire, everything he had built, was slipping away. He pressed his palms against his eyes, trembling. "How did I get here?" he whispered. But deep down, he already knew the answer. He had traded love for ego. And now, all he had left was emptiness. Meanwhile, across the city, Nadia helped Daniela pack a small box. "What's this for?" Daniela asked. "You're leaving this apartment," Nadia said with a smile. "Someone important wants to meet you." Daniela frowned. "Who?" Before Nadia could answer, the doorbell rang. When she opened it, standing outside was a tall, broad man, Chief Williams Okoro, Mark's greatest business rival. He removed his cap respectfully and said, "Good evening, ladies. I'm Claus de Sixtivery." Daniela turned her face toward his voice. "Who is it, Nadia?" Nadia smiled faintly. "Chief Williams. He says he came to see you." Daniela's lips parted in surprise. "To see me?" Chief Williams nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Daniela. I saw your story on the news. I lost my wife 2 years ago, and I know pain when I see it. I came here not as a businessman, but as a man who respects courage." He paused and looked at her with kindness. "And I want to help you see again." Daniela froze. The air around her seemed to stop moving. You mean surgery?" "Yes," he said softly. "I'll pay for it. Everything. I'll fly you abroad myself." Tears welled in Daniela's eyes, tears of disbelief, of gratitude, of new hope. Nadia covered her mouth, whispering, "Daniela, this is it. This is your miracle." Daniela's trembling fingers reached for her walking stick. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "God, you truly see even the blind." Chief Williams smiled kindly. "Pack your things. You're leaving tomorrow." And as she nodded, her heart began to beat faster. Not from fear this time, but from the first spark of a future that finally looked bright. The private jet hummed softly as it cut through the clouds above the Atlantic. Inside, Daniela sat by the window, her hands folded neatly on her lap. She couldn't see the endless blue sky outside, but she could feel it. The light warmth on her skin, the soft breeze from the cabin vent, the gentle rhythm of the journey. Beside her sat Chief Williams Okoro, the billionaire businessman who had promised to help her see again. His calm, fatherly voice broke the quiet. "Are you comfortable, my dear?" Daniela smiled faintly. "Yes, Chief. Just nervous." "That's normal," he said, chuckling softly. "You've been through worse storms than this one. You'll be fine." Nadia, who sat across from them, added cheerfully, "And when you open your eyes again, the first thing you'll see is me smiling at you." They all laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that filled the cabin with hope. For the first time in a long time, Daniela felt safe. 3 days later, at the London Eye Medical Centre, the sterile smell of hospital corridors filled Daniela's nose. She lay on a white bed, wearing a blue patient gown, her eyes covered in bandages. The surgery had gone well, the doctors said. Now came the hardest part, waiting. Chief Williams visited her every day, bringing flowers and gentle encouragement. He had quickly become more than a benefactor. He was now a friend, a guardian, a calm presence that filled the empty spaces where pain used to live. On the 7th morning, the doctor entered with a smile. "Mrs. Daniela, it's time." Daniela's heart raced. Nadia held her hand tightly as the nurse began unwrapping the gauze, layer by layer. Daniela's breath trembled. What if I can't see?" Chief Williams's deep voice rumbled softly from beside her bed. "Then we'll try again. And again. Until you do." The last layer came off. Daniela blinked rapidly, her lashes fluttering as her pupils adjusted to light. A bright blur. Then shapes. Then color. Her lips parted in shock. "I can see," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I can see." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she looked at Nadia's face, clear for the first time in years. Then she turned toward Chief Williams, whose kind eyes were glistening. "You're even more handsome than your voice sounded," she said through tears. They all laughed, and this time she laughed too, a full, unrestrained, joyful sound. For the first time in years, Daniela saw the world again. Over the next few weeks, Daniela recovered beautifully. She stayed in London for therapy, while Chief Williams insisted on handling every detail. He was always there, bringing her books to read, walking with her in the hospital garden, listening to her stories about her childhood and her dreams before the accident. And slowly, something began to grow between them. Something quiet, sincere, and deep. One evening, they stood together in the garden as the sun dipped behind the skyline. "I've been thinking about something," Chief Williams said, hands clasped behind him. Daniela turned to him, curious. "What is it?" He looked at her gently. "You gave a man your eyes, your strength, and your love. He didn't deserve it. But maybe you deserve someone who will give you all of that and more." Her breath caught. "Chief," he smiled, "I know you're not ready for another man's promise. But I am not rushing. I only want you to know when you're ready to love again, I will be waiting." For a moment, she couldn't speak. The kindness in his words hit deeper than any romantic speech ever could. She nodded softly. "Thank you, Chief. You've already given me more than I could ask for." But fate, it seemed, had already made its decision. 2 months later in Lagos, Nigeria, the newspapers carried another headline. Marktech declared bankrupt, assets seized, CEO under investigation. He didn't to the rain's knot. Mark's empire had crumbled completely. The house, the cars, even his company shares were gone. He sat alone in a small rented flat in Ikeja, staring at the cracked wall. His once smooth hands were rough now, his eyes hollow. Every night he replayed the same memory, the sightless face of his wife, pointing her walking stick at him and saying, "God will judge between us." And he had. One evening, as he watched the evening news on a small borrowed TV, he froze. On the screen was Daniela, dressed in white, smiling, her eyes bright and alive. The caption below read, "Former Marktech CEO's ex-wife, Daniela Benson, returns to Nigeria after successful eye surgery." Sponsored by business mogul Chief Williams Okoro. Mark's remote slipped from his hand. He leaned forward, mouth open. She can see?" he whispered. Then came the next headline, wedding announcement. Chief Williams and Daniela Benson, to wed next week in Lagos. Mark's world went silent. His breath caught in his throat. He could feel tears burning behind his eyes. He turned off the TV, buried his face in his hands, and whispered hoarsely, "Oh God, what have I done?" 1 week later, the wedding hall was filled with flowers and light. Cameras flashed, the choir sang softly, and guests whispered in admiration as the radiant bride walked down the aisle, hand in hand with Chief Williams. Daniela looked breathtaking, glowing, confident, peaceful. Every step she took erased years of darkness. She stopped halfway down the aisle, closed her eyes briefly, and whispered to herself, "I'm finally free." At the back of the church, hidden among the crowd, a man sat quietly. Mark. He wore a plain shirt, his hair unkempt, his eyes red from sleepless nights. He didn't come to cause trouble, he came to see her one last time. As the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the hall erupted in applause. Daniela smiled through tears as Chief Williams kissed her forehead gently. In that moment, Mark's tears fell freely. He whispered to himself, "She deserved better." And she finally got it. He stood and left quietly before anyone could notice. But 2 days later, unable to find peace, Mark did the unthinkable. He went to her mansion. When Chief Williams and Daniela stepped out hand in hand, they found him kneeling at the gate. His voice was shaking. "Daniela, please forgive me. I destroyed everything good in my life, including you. I'm sorry." Daniela's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was calm. "Mark, I forgave you long before today, because God already fought for me." Mark nodded slowly, crying. Then Chief Williams stepped forward and said gently, "Stand up, young man. You still have a gift, your mind. Come work for me. I'll make you general manager of Williams Tech. Start again." Mark looked up, stunned. You'd do that for me?" Chief Williams smiled. "We all fall, son. What matters is what we learn when we rise." And as Mark stood up slowly, tears streaming down his face, Daniela whispered, "Maybe now, you'll finally see." It had been 6 months since that unforgettable day at Chief Williams's mansion, the day Mark knelt in the rain to beg his blind wife, now healed, for forgiveness. The day the proud became humbled and the broken became whole. Mark had changed. Gone were the designer suits, the tinted cars, and the ego that once filled rooms before he entered them. These days, he woke up at 5:30 a.m., took a quiet walk through the compound, and reported to Williams Tech Industries like any other employee. His new title, General Manager, didn't come with the arrogance it once would have. This time, it came with gratitude. Chief Williams made it clear, "Here, you'll rebuild your name through discipline, not through pity. You'll lead through humility, not fear." And Mark listened. He listened to every word because he had already lost everything once. The company's head office was a towering glass building in Victoria Island, overlooking the ocean. It was sleek and modern, with a lobby that smelled faintly of mint and ambition. Every morning, Mark walked through those glass doors, greeted the receptionist with a polite smile, and went straight to work. No driver, no entourage, no flash. He worked harder than anyone else. When staff complained, he stayed back to help them. When reports were delayed, he compiled them himself. When deadlines seemed impossible, he led by example. Within months, everyone noticed the transformation. The once arrogant CEO who used to bark orders now stood beside technicians, sleeves rolled up, discussing software bugs. It shocked people, and it humbled them too. One afternoon, after a long board meeting, Chief Williams called him into his office. The older man's tone was gentle. "Mark, you've done well. You've rebuilt more than just a company. You've rebuilt yourself." Mark smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir. But I'm still learning." Chief Williams chuckled. "That's what makes you a better man. Pride ends where learning begins." He paused, then added, "There's someone waiting for you outside. She asked to see you." Mark frowned slightly and stood. "Who?" "Your ex-wife," Chief Williams said softly. "Daniela." Mark froze for a second. His heart began to pound the way it used to when he was young and foolish. He hadn't seen Daniela since the day she forgave him. When he walked out of the office, she was standing in the lobby, glowing in a soft yellow gown, her hair braided neatly, eyes bright and alive. She looked at peace. For a moment, Mark couldn't breathe. He was staring at the same woman he once called blind and broken. now more radiant than he'd ever imagined. "Daniela," he said quietly, bowing his head slightly. "Mark," she replied, smiling warmly. "You look different." He chuckled nervously. "Maybe because life finally humbled me." They both laughed softly, awkward but genuine. "I heard about your work here," she said, holding her purse close. "Chief Williams speaks highly of you." Mark nodded. "He's a good man, a better man than I ever was." Daniela's eyes softened. "Don't say that. You're trying to be better, and that's enough." He looked up at her, guilt flickering in his gaze. "I still think about that night, Daniela. The wedding night. Every single day. I can't forget what I did." She took a slow breath and stepped closer. "And every single day, I've prayed for you. Not for your success, for your peace." Her words pierced him. His eyes glistened. "You prayed for me? After everything I did?" Daniela nodded. "Because forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about freeing yourself from pain. I forgave you the day I realized my blindness was never my curse. Your arrogance was yours." Mark looked down, tears falling quietly onto his hands. "You're right," he whispered. "I was blind, not you." She smiled gently. "Now you see." Later that evening, Chief Williams hosted a small dinner in his home, a celebration of the company's recovery. Daniela, now his wife, sat at his side, looking elegant and serene. Mark was invited too, sitting across from them, his heart full but calm. The table buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and warm stories. Halfway through the evening, Chief Williams raised a toast. "To second chances," he said, smiling toward Mark. "To grace that rebuilds, and love that restores." Mark stood up, glass trembling slightly in his hand. "And to forgiveness," he added, "because it takes more strength to forgive than to win." Everyone clapped softly. When the dinner ended, Mark walked out to the balcony alone, staring at the night sky. Daniela followed quietly and joined him. "The stars are bright tonight," she said softly. "They always were," Mark replied, smiling faintly. "I just never stopped long enough to notice." For a moment, they stood in silence, two souls who had once destroyed each other, now finding healing in peace. "Daniela," Mark said after a pause, "I'll never be able to repay what I took from you." She turned to him gently. "You already have, Mark. By changing. By becoming who you were always meant to be." Her eyes glistened as she looked up at the sky. "When I was blind, I used to dream about colors. I imagined what light looked like. But the day I forgave you, I saw something brighter than any color. Peace." Mark swallowed hard. "And I saw truth," he said. "That wealth means nothing if your heart is empty. That success built on betrayal is failure dressed in gold." Daniela nodded. Then we both learned to see again. Weeks later, Mark officially became the lead developer at Williams Tech, handling major innovation projects. His designs helped the company triple its profits. And for the first time, he was celebrated not for his name, but for his work. He bought a small apartment, donated most of his salary to a charity for the visually impaired, and started volunteering every weekend at a school for blind children. The same gift Daniela had once carried, the ability to translate smell, became the name of the foundation he sponsored, Fragrance of Hope. Every time he entered that school, he remembered her voice saying, "If you were truly sincere, God will pay you what you deserve." He realized now that payment wasn't punishment. It was redemption. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Daniela visited the school. The children ran to her with joy, their laughter filling the room. Mark stood by the door, smiling, humbled. When their eyes met, there was no bitterness, no regret, only gratitude. "You see, Mark," Daniela said, looking around at the happy children. "Out of all the pain, something beautiful grew." He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "You were my lesson, Daniela. The woman who taught a proud man to truly see." She smiled warmly. "And you were my reminder that miracles aren't always about getting back what was lost, but becoming who you're meant to be." They stood there in peaceful silence, surrounded by laughter and sunlight streaming through the open window. Two people who had once destroyed each other's world, now rebuilding lives together, not as lovers, but as forgiven souls who finally understood what love really meant. As Daniela turned to leave, a soft breeze carried her scent, lavender and calm, and Mark closed his eyes, smiling. This time, he didn't need sight to understand its meaning. He finally saw, "What is your view about this story?" Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, comment, share and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.